After I refused to give my mom my inheritance, she invited me to a family meeting. When I arrived, they had no idea what I'd brought with me. My name is Savannah Calloway, and 3 weeks after my grandfather's funeral, my mother sent a group text that made my blood run cold. Family meeting, Sunday, 3 p.m. Be on time. No explanation, no warm greeting, no hope you are doing well. Just a demand delivered like a court summons, and like a fool I went. The house looked exactly as I remembered. Manicured lawn, white picket fence, that wraparound porch with a swing nobody ever used. But something felt different the moment I stepped through the front door. It wasn't the lighting or the familiar scent of vanilla candles. It was the arrangement. My family sat stiffly in the living room like actors waiting for their cue. And there were 2 strangers in expensive navy suits already positioned in the good chairs, the ones usually reserved for Christmas dinner. Savannah, my mother, Linda, beamed with that plastic smile she wore at PTA meetings and charity auctions, the one that never reached her eyes. "Meet our family consultants." She gestured toward the suited men like they were old friends, as if this wasn't an obvious ambush with a dress code. One of them stood to shake my hand. I didn't move. I glanced at my sister Emma, who was studying her manicured nails like they held the secrets of the universe. Then at my younger brother James, whose eyes were red-rimmed but dry. My stepfather Rick stood by the fireplace, arms crossed, looking like he'd been rehearsing that pose in the mirror for weeks. "Would you like some sweet tea?" Mom asked, her voice dripping with false hospitality. I set down my leather purse and crossed my legs. "No, I'd like to know why I'm here." "Because we're family," she said, her tone syrupy and rehearsed. "And your grandfather would have wanted us to work together." That's when it hit me. This wasn't a meeting. This wasn't even a conversation. It was a presentation, a coordinated effort to make me hand over the one thing they hadn't been able to steal while he was alive. His legacy. Unfortunately for them, I'd come prepared. My grandfather, Robert Big Bob Calloway, wasn't just the man who raised me after Dad died. He was the reason I believed in hard work, in keeping your word, in building something that lasts. He'd started Calloway Construction with nothing but a beat-up Ford pickup and a handshake loan from his neighbor. By the time I was born, it was the biggest construction company in 3 counties. While Emma begged for designer handbags and James played video games, I asked to visit the job sites. I loved the smell of sawdust, the sound of hammers, the way Grandpa's voice carried across construction sites when he walked the crew. When I was 12, he handed me my first calculator and said, "Let's see how your brain handles numbers instead of dolls." I was hooked, and now, sitting in that living room with my family's greedy eyes boring into me, I realized they were about to find out just how well my brain handled numbers and the truth. The will reading had been 2 weeks after the funeral in a mahogany-paneled conference room that smelled like old money and fresh coffee. Mom wore black Chanel and oversized sunglasses like she was auditioning for a soap opera. Emma sniffled dramatically through the preliminaries. James just looked confused. The attorney, Mr. Harrison, kept his voice steady as he worked through the formalities. Minor gifts to charity, a scholarship fund for trade school students, a small pension for Grandpa's longtime foreman. Then came the bombshell. To my granddaughter, Savannah Claire Calloway, I leave the remainder of my estate, including all shares in Calloway Construction, my investment accounts, real estate holdings, and personal effects. The room went dead silent. I felt the shock before I heard the reaction. "This is a mistake," Mom sputtered, pushing her sunglasses up. "He must have been confused. Read it again." "I've read it several times, Mrs. Calloway," Harrison replied calmly. "Your father was very explicit." Emma gasped like she had been slapped. "He loved all of us equally. He wouldn't play favorites." James said nothing, just stared at his hands like they might disappear. "This can't be happening," Mom whispered. But it was. In that moment, I wasn't just his granddaughter anymore. I was the sole heir to everything Robert Calloway had built from nothing. And I definitely wasn't ready for what came next. Later in the parking lot, Mom cornered me with that fake sweet voice she used when she wanted something. Just sign it all over to me, honey. I'll divide everything fairly. I'll make sure everyone's taken care of. I didn't answer immediately, not because I was unsure, but because I needed to choose my words carefully. I need time to process this. Her eyes narrowed. This isn't just yours, Savannah. It's family money, family legacy. That's not what Grandpa decided. Her mask slipped. He wasn't thinking clearly. You spent too much time with him, filled his head with ideas. But he had been thinking clearly. He'd updated the will 6 months before his death, fully lucid and completely intentional. I remembered that day well. He called me into his home office and said, "They're going to hate this decision, but I built this company for someone who understands what it cost me. That person isn't your mother." It wasn't a compliment. It was a burden, a responsibility, and now it was mine. The messages started that night. First, Emma, "Please don't let this tear our family apart. We're still sisters." Then, Mom, "You'll understand when you have children of your own. Family comes first." Then James, a single text at 2:17 a.m. Why? By morning, my voicemail was full of messages from Mom's church friends, women I hadn't seen since high school graduation. "Savannah, I'm just heartbroken. Your mother raised you better than this. Such a disappointment." That word kept coming up. Disappointment. What they didn't understand, what they'd never bothered to learn, was what Grandpa and I had actually built together. What my family's friends didn't see was the real relationship Grandpa and I had shared. It wasn't about favoritism or manipulation. It was about mutual respect built one late-night phone call and one job site visit at a time. While Mom spent her weekends at the country club and Emma shopped at the mall, I was learning to read blueprints and understand profit margins. When other kids were watching cartoons, I was asking Grandpa about load-bearing walls and construction schedules. I didn't inherit Callaway construction like winning the lottery. I earned it through years of genuine interest and hard work. But none of that mattered in the court of family opinion. 2 days after the voicemail avalanche, James showed up outside my apartment. No call, no text, just his hunched figure on the security camera. Hands shoved deep in his jacket pockets like a kid who'd forgotten his homework. When I opened the door, he didn't step inside. "I'm not here to argue," he said quietly. "Okay." He looked up, his eyes bloodshot but focused. "Mom's losing it. She's already called 3 real estate agents, says she needs to refinance the house before you freeze the assets." I blinked. "I haven't frozen anything." "She doesn't believe that." James shifted his weight. "Look, I just wanted to warn you, she's planning something big." Then he left. No hug, no handshake, just walked back down the hallway like he wasn't sure where he belonged anymore. I closed the door and stood there in the silence, not sad or angry, just empty. This was only the beginning. That night, my boyfriend Mason, the only person who hadn't suddenly started treating me like a walking ATM, brought Chinese takeout and held my hand while I stared blankly at my low man. "I want you to meet someone," he said gently. "Her name's Margaret Chun. She's a probate attorney, old friend from law school. She's not looking for a fight unless you need one. She's about protection." I didn't answer, but I nodded. The next morning, I called Margaret. We met in her understated office above a coffee shop. No intimidating glass walls or power suits, just plants, natural light, and someone who listened without interrupting. After hearing everything, she leaned back, fingers steepled. "You're already in the middle of a coordinated pressure campaign. Classic family guilt tactics. But based on the will and what you've told me, you're on solid legal ground." "I don't want to fight them," I said. "I just want it to stop." "Then we prepare," she said. "Just in case. Document every message, every voicemail, every visit, and no signing anything no matter what they call it." It sounded simple until the next message arrived. A photo of Mom at Pottery Barn shopping for new furniture. The caption read, "Retail therapy through grief, #self-care, #blessed." That same day, she texted claiming she couldn't afford her electric bill. That's when I started printing everything. The formal invitation arrived as a text message from Mom. Sunday 3 p.m. house. Let's resolve this. Bring your paperwork. No signature, no emoji, just a time-stamped grenade. Margaret didn't like it. This feels like an ambush, she warned. It is, I replied, but I'm not walking in blind. She offered to come with me. I declined. I need to face them myself, but I want you nearby. One text, she said, and I'll be at your door in 60 seconds. I arrived at exactly 2:59 p.m. The curtains were drawn and the porch smelled faintly of Mom's signature perfume, Chanel No. 5, which told me she'd been outside earlier, probably rehearsing her lines. She opened the door before I could knock. "Savannah!" She beamed, hair freshly styled, teeth gleaming like a campaign poster. "Right on time." Inside, the living room was arranged like a courtroom. Emma sat on the edge of the sofa, spine rigid, hands knotted in her lap. James beside her, eyes down. Rick hovered near the fireplace like a bouncer at a nightclub. And there they were, the two suited men from my nightmares, seated in the good chairs with legal pads, briefcases, and wedding rings catching the light. Their smiles were too wide, too practiced. "This is Mr. Hayes and Mr. Donovan," Mom said, gesturing grandly. "They've kindly offered to help us untangle this unfortunate misunderstanding." I nodded but didn't offer a handshake. I wasn't here to play nice. Only one chair was available, a high-backed wooden one placed directly across from them. Interrogation seating. I sat without a word and placed my leather portfolio across my lap. "Would you like some sweet tea?" Mom asked again, still clinging to her desperate illusion of Southern hospitality. "I'm fine, let's get to it." Mr. Hayes cleared his throat. "We're here today because your family is deeply concerned about the strain the situation has caused. No one wants a prolonged legal dispute, especially when your grandfather's intention was clearly for the family to remain united." I let the silence stretch like taffy. "He wrote a will," I said finally. Mom jumped in, her voice honey-sweet and iron-hard. "And we're not disputing that, sweetheart. But surely you can agree that dividing everything equally would be more harmonious." Harmony wasn't mentioned in the will either. Mr. Donovan opened his briefcase, sliding a stack of documents across the coffee table like he was dealing cards. "This is a voluntary redistribution agreement," he said. "You retain a generous percentage, 25%, and the rest returns to the family as was always understood." Understood by whom? Emma finally spoke, her voice barely a whisper. "Grandpa was sick. Savannah, he wasn't thinking clearly. He thought you'd know what was right." "I do know what's right," I said calmly, "which is why I won't be signing that." James stirred. "Mom says if we don't resolve this, we might lose the house." I looked directly at him. "And why is that? Did someone take out another home equity loan?" Mom's expression cracked for a split second before snapping back into place like a rubber band. "Savannah, don't do this." Mr. Hayes jumped in quickly. "It would be unfortunate if this moved to court. Claims of undue influence could damage the estate's reputation and delay distribution for everyone." There it was, the threat wrapped in legal jargon and delivered with a smile. I placed my hand on my portfolio. "Before I respond to that, I'd like to clarify something." I looked directly at Rick. 6 months ago, you mentioned to Grandpa's home health aide that you'd already put a deposit on a lake house in Gatlinburg. Was that with inheritance money you hadn't yet received? His mouth opened, then closed like a fish gasping for air. "I have a recording," I continued calmly, "and a paper trail." Mom's smile vanished completely. I opened my portfolio and laid out the first document, a photocopy from Grandpa's personal ledger, his careful handwriting clearly visible. "Loan Linda $25,000, said for James's college. Heard later it was for a cruise." Then the next item, a printed Instagram photo of Mom sipping champagne on a cruise ship, dated last spring. Caption, "Finally treating myself, #blessed cruisy life." I looked up at the two consultants who were suddenly very interested in their legal pads. "Still feel like drawing up paperwork today?" Nobody answered. The silence was deafening. Mom stood so suddenly her chair scraped against the hardwood floor. "You ungrateful little—" I didn't flinch. I just slid another paper across the table. April 15th. You told Grandpa that Emma needed emergency dental surgery. He gave you $18,000. I glanced at Emma. You were in Miami that weekend, weren't you? Spring break with your sorority sisters. I remember the photos, especially the one with the monogrammed beach bag. Emma went pale as moonlight. Rick cursed under his breath. Savannah, this is low, he snarled, digging through a dead man's records to turn his memory against his own family. He wasn't confused, I said, my voice steady as granite. He was exhausted from being lied to, and he kept records because he knew this day would come. I reached for the final item in my portfolio, a sealed envelope slightly worn, addressed in Grandpa's distinctive handwriting. For Savannah, if they come for it. I didn't open it. I didn't need to. But the two men in suits were already shifting in their chairs, confidence draining from their faces like water from a broken dam. Mr. Hayes tugged at his tie. Miss Calloway, we were told this would be a cooperative discussion. It was never going to be that. I turned to Mom. You didn't tell them I already retained real legal counsel, did you? She's in a car outside. One word from me and she's at this door in 60 seconds. The two consultants stood up in perfect unison. Well, we'll excuse ourselves, Hayes muttered, snapping his briefcase shut. Mrs. Calloway, we were unaware of any existing legal representation. They couldn't get out fast enough. Mom's face turned to stone, every muscle rigid with barely contained fury. This isn't over, she hissed through clenched teeth. Actually, I said, standing and gathering my documents with deliberate slowness. It is. I looked around the room at Emma's tear-streaked face, at Rick's clenched fists, at James's confused expression. I'm not signing anything. I won't enable your spending habits, and I won't let you rewrite history just because the present doesn't suit your narrative anymore. You owe us. Mom's voice cracked like a whip. I owe Grandpa. That's who I'm honoring. Then James stood up. Everyone froze, even Rick. James never made waves, never caused scenes, never stood up to anyone. I didn't know, he said quietly, his voice cutting through the tension like a blade. About the cruise or the dental surgery, or that you used my name to take money from Grandpa. He looked directly at Mom. You told me Savannah was being selfish, but you lied about everything. James, sit down, she snapped. No. The word hit like a thunderclap. He turned to me, his eyes clear for the first time in weeks. Can I come with you? I nodded. Let's go. Rick stepped forward, chest puffed out like a rooster. You little piece of... I raised my phone. This entire conversation has been recorded. He stopped cold, the fight draining out of him like air from a punctured tire. James and I walked toward the door, passing the stunned faces of a family that had always assumed I'd bend, always assumed I'd break, always assumed I'd give in. Not this time. Margaret was already out of her car when we stepped onto the driveway, her professional instincts sharp as always. You okay? She asked, eyeing James with concern. He's with me, I said firmly, and we're done here. Behind us, the front door slammed so hard the porch light flickered like a dying bulb. But for the first time in weeks, I didn't look back. James didn't say much during the drive to my apartment. He sat in the passenger seat, staring straight ahead, his fingers occasionally tightening around the seatbelt like it was the only thing keeping him anchored. When we reached my building, he followed me inside without asking permission. He already knew the answer. You're on the couch, I said. It folds out. Clean sheets are in the hall closet. He nodded. Thanks. We didn't talk about what had happened that night. We just existed in the quiet. I made chamomile tea. He drank it without complaint. I scrolled through emails. He stared at the ceiling. The silence wasn't heavy or awkward. It was healing. By morning, I had a plan. I drove to Grandpa's house, the one I now legally owned but hadn't touched since the funeral. I unlocked the front door and the air rushed out stale with memory and dust. I went straight to his home office, where the smell of old coffee and cedar still lingered faintly. Grandpa's desk was exactly as he'd left it. Reading glasses folded on top of a construction trade magazine. coffee mug with a ring stain and his leather-bound journal sitting in the center like a waiting confession. I opened the journal and flipped through its pages, seeing everything laid out in his precise handwriting. Dates, amounts, names, and detailed notes about every loan, every emergency, every manipulation. Then I found a note I'd missed before, scribbled in the margin near the back. Savannah has what Linda never learned, restraint and clarity. If she chooses to lead this business, it may survive me. If she chooses to love it, it may outlive us both. I sat there for a long time, just breathing in the familiar scent of his workspace. That afternoon, I met Margaret for lunch and showed her the journal. She helped me file it as supplementary evidence with the probate court, sealing any potential loopholes that might be exploited later. We also drafted paperwork for an educational trust in James's name, just enough to support his degree without tying him to anyone's financial leash. "This is clean, fair, and generous," Margaret said as I signed the documents. When I got home that evening, James was reading one of Grandpa's old construction magazines on the couch. "You know," I said, leaning against the doorframe, "he always wanted to expand into sustainable construction, green building materials, solar integration, eco-friendly concrete, but the board wouldn't move fast enough." James looked up. "I remember him talking about that during Sunday dinners." I smiled. "What would you say to an internship? Real work, no shortcuts, no family favoritism." He blinked. "Are you serious?" "Completely." A slow smile spread across his face, relief, hope, maybe even a trace of pride. "Yeah," he said, "I'd really like that." We clinked mugs of lukewarm tea in silent agreement. It wasn't the kind of legacy Mom had wanted, but it was better. 1 year later, I reopened the doors of Callaway Construction. Not as the quiet granddaughter who'd inherited a business, but as its next chapter. James now runs our sustainability division while finishing his engineering degree. He's becoming the kind of man Grandpa always hoped he'd be. Quietly capable, steady, focused on building things that last. Emma reaches out sometimes in small, careful ways. I don't open the door wide, but I don't slam it shut either. Healing takes time, and forgiveness is a process, not an event. Mom disappeared to Florida 6 months ago, chasing some new opportunity that probably involves someone else's money. That's fine, some people never learn. Some inheritances are measured in dollars and cents. Others are measured in scars, in choices, in the courage to stand alone when standing together means compromising your soul. Grandpa didn't leave me his empire out of favoritism. He left it because I was the only one who wouldn't burn it down for quick cash. In his journal, he once wrote, "Savannah won't always be loved for doing what's right, but she'll sleep at night." He was right, I do.